about the different properties to generate equivalent expression. For example, like 5 plus 2 is the same or equivalent to 2 plus 5. Why is that? Why is 5 plus 2 the same thing as 2 plus 5? They're both 7. So before we do that, let's review how to write algebraic expression. And again, an expression is like a math phrase that contains numbers, operations, and variables, which are letters or symbols that should represent a number. A plumber charges $50 to visit a house plus $40 for every hour of work. There's an unknown here. They didn't tell us enough information from here. What did they not tell you enough information? I don't think they didn't tell us enough how many hours did he work. So that must be our variable or symbol or letter. Number of hours worked. I'm going to use H. Again, you may use any letter or symbol you want to use, but you can use H or W. But I think H makes more sense. So define a variable. We just did that. Now write an expression to represent the total cost of hiring a plumber. So it costs $50 for him to visit your house. Then he charges $40 for each hour you work. So it's 50 plus $40 times the number of hours he worked. Another way you could have written it is 50 plus 40H. Another way you could write it is 40H plus 50. And there's so many different ways to write it. So why is 50 plus 40H equivalent to 40H plus 50? It's something called commutative property. So we're going to be learning that in a few seconds. So this is the answer to the solution. So he charges $50 plus $40 for every hour he worked. Or he charges $40 for every hour he worked. We don't know how many hours he worked, plus $50 fee to just drive to your house to assess the issue. So the first property is called commutative property. Commutative property is when you have a number. The way I memorize it, commute is back and forth. When you commute, when your parents drive to their work, they commute back and forth. They go one way and come back. For example, 5 plus 2 is the same as 2 plus 5. So yeah, this is called commutative property of addition. Even though we do 5 plus 2, you can reverse it. So you can do back and forth. You can flip it around and you get 2 plus 5 and you still get the same equivalent expression. So what about 4 plus 9? Is that the same as saying 9 plus 4? Yes, both solutions, both of them will be equivalent to 13. So what about multiplication? 2 times 5. Is there another way to generate another equivalent expression to this? What about 5 times 2? They both equal 10. And what about 10 times 4? Is there another expression you can, another expression that's equivalent to 10 times 4? What about 4 times 10? However, this commutative property trigger, does it work for division and subtraction? 5 minus 2. Is it the same as saying 2 minus 5? No, because you have 5, you take away 2, you get 3, and 2 take away 5, it has to be negative 3, so no. What about division? 10 divided by 2. Is it the same as saying 2 divided by 10? No, that's 5 and this is 1/5, so no. It only works for addition and multiplication. So whenever I hear a kid say, so I always ask, why do you need to know this? For example, I always ask a kid, so what are the factors of 12? I always hear kids say 6 times 2, and another kid will say 2 times 6. Isn't that the same thing? So associative property is think of associate with your friends. So this is how I think of it as. You have 2 plus 4, which is 6, plus 1 more makes 7. Is there another way you could have added this? What happens if someone did it this way? He decided to, I'm going to add 4 plus 1 first, which is 5, plus 2 more is 7. Did they generate another equivalent expression? Are they both the same? Yes. So you can either add the first 2 numbers up, plus 1 more, and get 7. Or you could have added the last 2 numbers and add 2 more and get 7. So this is associative property. So you're associating with different friends. That's how I think of it. So what about, let's do multiplication. 2 times 4 times 3. What's 2 times 4? 8. What's 8 times 3? 24. What happened by a different person? Could he have solved it a different way? Could a person have done it this way? What's 4 times 3? Remember, you do the grouping symbol first. 12. 12 times 2 is 24. So even though he did it a different way, different strategy, did he have the same equivalent answer as the first person? Yes, he did. They both got 24. So in this one, as you can see, you're associating with different numbers. Next one, think identity property. Identity, I think of it as this. Identify yourself because, so 5 plus 0 is just 5. So imagine you're standing in front of a mirror and you're identifying yourself. So it's like you're adding nothing and you're still getting the same answer. That's identity property. So what about -6? What can I add to -6 so it still stays -6? 0. What about 9? What can I multiply 9 by so it still remains the same identity, same self? 1. So it's still 9. What about -20? What can I multiply -20 by and it still remains -20 by 1? So an identity is you're adding or multiplying by a number and it still remains the same identity. And last but not least, inverse property. In an inverse, I think of it as a reverse. We've done inverse. Remember the reciprocal, where when you divide a fraction and you had to flip the bottom, the denominator with the numerator? That is really what you're doing. You're doing inverse. And for example, you have 3/4. What is the reverse? Or that's how I think inverse is like reverse. What's the reverse of 3/4? 4/3. And that will equal 1. And these two are equivalent. So what about 6? What is the inverse or reverse of 6? What is the reciprocal of 6 in other words? Remember, 6 is the same thing as saying, how do you write 6 as a fraction? 6/1, and then 1/6, and that's 1 whole. What about 7? What is the reverse or the opposite of 7? -7, and you get 0. And let's try -4. What is the inverse or the opposite or reverse of -4? 4, and you get 0. So we're going to go through each example, and you're going to go back and decide which property did they use, and are they equivalent? Is 7 times grouping of 3 times 2, is it the same as saying 7 times 3 grouping times 2? They are the same. You're associating with friends, so it's associative. 16 times 8 and 8 times 16. Is that equivalent? It's the same thing. It's commuting, it's back and forth, so it's commutative. What about 27 times 1 and 1 times 27? Back and forth, so it's commutative. These are equivalent. 16 plus 0 is just 16. It remains the same. So it's like identity. It's still the same identity. It has not changed. Number 5. 12 plus the grouping of 5 plus 2 is the same as the grouping of 12 plus 5 plus 2. So you're associative. You're associating with different friends. 14 is the same as 1 times 14. So it still stays the same identity. 32 plus 4 is the same as 4 plus 32. They are both equivalent, so it's commutative, it's back and forth. And 40 plus -40 gets 0. They did the opposite. They did the reverse of it. Oh, inverse. And 4/5 times 5/4 and makes 1. So 4/5, they look like they did the opposite or reverse, so it's inverse. And those are the identity of the properties. So let's see in real life. Luzon has 8 fish, 3 cats, and 2 dogs. Write 2 equivalent expressions using associative property that can be used to find a total number of pets. So for example, what happens if John solves it like this way? First adds the fish and dogs, which gets 11. Then he adds the dogs to it, and he gets 13. But what happens if there's a girl named Maribel, and she solves it this way? She adds the cats and dogs first because she likes them first. And then she goes back and adds up the fish. and she gets 13. Will they be equivalent? Yes. So this grouping of 8 plus 3 plus 2 is the same as doing 8 plus the grouping of 3 plus 2. Associative property. Taylor noticed that for the rectangle below, she could multiply 2 times 3 to get an area of 6 square inches. How else could she have done it? You know what? She could have done 3 times 2. I might have done it 2 times 3. Is there anything wrong with doing it that way? No. Because in multiplication, it's commutative. Back and forth, no matter how you do it, you'll still get the same response. So which property is it? Commutative. And that is our properties. So we have 4 properties. We have commutative, which means back and forth. Like 5 plus 2 is 2 plus 5. 5 times 2 is 2 times 5. Associative is where you have grouping. This first grouping plus something is the same as the second grouping plus something. It's associating with different friends. Identity, the way I mean it is you have the same identity. What can you do to it to keep it the same identity, the same number? Like 5 plus 0 is 5. And last but not least, you have inverse. Inverse is like reverse. So what can you do to opposite, reverse of it, so it becomes 1 or 0? Properties.